Welcome to Poems and Potions. Today we are interviewing Karen Scott. Hi, Karen.
Hello.
Hey, Karen.
Of course, technology.
Karen is a poet living in Columbus, Ohio. She is a member/supporter of Ohio Poetry Association, a past participant in the Women of Appalachia project, and a proud member of the Salon Writing Group. Her work has been published in Common Threads, Women Speak, Delirious, a poetic celebration of Prince, Sun and Shadow, Wood and Stone, the inaugural issue of the Northern Appalachia Review, and Quarantine, published by the OPAWL. She has been included in the following anthologies this year: American Graveyard, Calls to End Gun Violence, the Dead Pets Poetry Anthology, and the final issue of Pudding Magazine. Monsters and Moles Gel were published on Moontide Press website as Poet of the Month, August 2022. Hami Dulich was made into a broadside on poetrysuperhighway.com. Welcome, Karen. Thank you very much for being here.
Hi. I'm glad to be here.
Welcome, Karen.
Marquita.
With us today is Marquita Byers. Hello, Marquita.
Hey, how you doing?
I am doing wonderfully. It's a beautiful day. And I am your host, also known as Ryan. All right. So let's get into it. Do you want to start, Marquita, or would you like me to?
Why don't you start?
Ooh, giving me the challenge. Okay. I'm down for it.
All right.
All right. So, Karen, if you would be so kind, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey as a poet.
Wow. Okay. Well, my name is Karen Scott, and I have been living here in Columbus since 1990. This is my second go round with Columbus because I came in 1972 to attend Ohio State, and yes, I am an OSU grad. So, as far as poetry goes, I told a story at Streetlight Guild the other night. The fact that I wrote a poem when I was like 7 in second grade, and my mother was a teacher. She wasn't impressed with it, and me being a Virgo and an introvert, I kind of didn't take that criticism well, and just didn't write anymore until I got in my 20s. And I didn't write a whole lot then. I met my my future husband then, and some of our best poetry does come when we're in breakups instead of blissful love life. And so then I got into the Columbus poetry scene and back into poetry in about the fall of 2010. My daughter was then starting her junior year of high school. She was going to Metro Early College High School, and they're pretty much a STEM school. So there's a program called Mosaic that is also available, and that's where the kids can get their humanities credits. And Mosaic was facilitated at the time by Kim Letty and Steve Shapiro, and they really had a thing for out of classroom learning and giving the kids independence, etc. So even before they had set foot at Mosaic, they had a sheet the week before school started that listed activities they might want to check into. And one of them was open mic night at Righting Wrongs, which is a venue that was on Tuesday nights. And I took her and went with her on the first one. Then I dropped her off for about a month of Tuesdays. And then I started going. And then I started writing, and then I got convinced to get up on the open mic, and that started it all. And then I made a habit of trying to attend almost everything poetry. And back in the day, we had a poetry venue every day of the week and twice on Thursdays, and um, so that got to be a little bit of a burden because Scott told people that basically I legitimized your event, and if I didn't show up, then your wasn't poop. He didn't say poop.
I
So,
appreciate Scott's.
I've heard him say that before. So Karen, a lot of times I am like looking around when I'm at it, and I'm like, has Karen Scott been
I
here yet?
know. it's it's funny when I showed up at JG's The Nest finally, he goes, I'm legitimate. So, yeah.
Oh.
I like that. I hope to one day have that feeling.
I start up a venue and post it on the Columbus Poetry Calendar, which I took over from Alexis Mitchell. And, I might show up.
So can you tell us a little about your childhood, Karen?
I'm an Air Force brat, which is what you call the children of military men, and we actually are a culture. A woman wrote a book where she had interviewed lots of military brats, and found that we have some characteristics in common, and that we are technically a culture. And so that meant most of us got to travel in our childhood, and we lived in a lot of different places, and went to a lot of different schools, and most tours of duty are like 3 months, with your family. And that also gave us the opportunity for diversity and resiliency, and that basically if you were somewhere and you didn't like it, you knew you were going to be gone at the end of 3 years, and that you could go to a new place. And if you wanted to, you could reinvent yourself and how you're going to be presented to the next group of peers when you're on another tour. So, thanks to the military, I got to spend third grade in the Philippines. Second grade was in Biloxi, Mississippi in 1962, which was, of course, civil rights. But living on an Air Force base is kind of like a gated community. It's a city unto itself. It has guards at the gate. So I was, even if the times were turbulent, we were protected. So, and we never made Europe. My dad went on temporary duty to Europe, but we never lived in Europe as a family. And we did 2 tours in Illinois, so I kind of had a Midwestern upbringing. So, yeah.
If I may ask, you've been all around the world, kind of. How have those experiences, even though you were younger, do you feel that those experiences have affected your poetry?
I think they have, because my poetry, a lot of it is poems of memoir. And so, my childhood, my adulthood, my being a mother, my widowhood, all of those things creep in to the poetry. As far as my outlook on life, I mean, I'm not like a person who grew up in the same town their whole life and lived in the same house. I have a friend from third grade that she still lives in the house that she was born into, and she has lived there all her life. So I call her the compass point, those old metal compasses. she's the pointy end, the pointy metal end, and I'm the pencil, and I run circles around her. But we always come back together because she's where she is all the time. So we're those friends, who may not talk to each other for 3 years, pick up the phone and then talk for 3 hours, just like we had talked to each other yesterday. So I also have a worldview. I don't consider myself just a citizen of Ohio, just a citizen of the United States. I have a global outlook. And so whenever something's happening where I live, I also have a view as to how it's affecting or is affected by things happening around the world. So I'm a world citizen and not just a United States citizen.
I like that. The whole world citizen thing. But we talked about how you got into the poetry scene based on Mosaic, which was really around Alex.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you tell us about some of your other early experiences with the Columbus poetry scene outside of Mosaic?
Good. Yeah, at the time that I got into the poetry scene, Columbus had a very vibrant scene. And what you're seeing now is the fact that people have been in this for decades, and things are changing. It's time for people to be able to do what they need to do. Other branches, I've seen numbers of poets who've decided maybe I'm a fiction author and not a poet, and they stop writing poetry for a while. But everybody deserves to be able to do the next thing that they need to do in their evolution. But at the time that I did get into the Columbus poetry scene, slam was big. Columbus hosted Women of the World for 2 years. We hosted Rust Belt for 2 years. I was able to go up to Cleveland for a slam, and I took the girls with me. I took Alex and her friend Kenzie, who was also a poet. They joined, and they actually went to a youth activity while I slept in at the hotel, and they 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 came they got the opportunity to open the slam that night because of their group piece that they did that morning. So because the people who won first place couldn't come that evening, so the second place people got to open. So they were able to get up on the slam stage to start everything off that night. So
Could you tell us a little bit about your experiences with slam?
I'm laughing because everybody that knows me knows I do not slam. I will judge poetry slams. I don't necessarily like to. When there's a slam, I prefer to be timekeeper, backup, mathematician for the scores. I don't really like judging, and I definitely don't slam because one, I don't memorize poems well, and for a while there in slam, if you read off your paper, you got a lower score because people wanted you to have polished that piece and to be able to say your piece from memory, and people practiced, etc. And it wasn't until maybe 2015, 2016, where Dominique, of course, I'm blanking on her last name. Dominique won reading off of her paper, and that was like a pivotal moment. So yeah, slam was fantastic, and you know that Scott was the president of National Poetry Slam Incorporated for about 9 years. But like anything else, once he moved once he moved away from it, it kind of went downhill and then it slowly dissolved. So they 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 restarted it, and so we still have national events, but not quite as many as we had when MPSI was up and running full steam.
Ever
Yeah.
so slowly, as we interview poets, we're getting a little bit more for newer poets to the scene who may not know what slam is. We're hearing more and more stories about it. So this is really interesting to get the various perspectives and to hear things. So thank you very much for that.
No problem.
We talked about early influences, about your poetry. What point did you know that your poetry was good? When did you gain that?
It's kind of like even now, um, I say as long as people keep asking me to read, then it must be striking a chord with people. So, and a lot of people, when I go to some of my habitual Zoom rooms that we picked up during the pandemic, um, you know, people are chatting with me in the chat and going, "Are you reading tonight? You're not? I'm disappointed." And as long as that keeps happening, I'll keep writing and reading. So yeah. When I first got into the poetry scene, um, I worried about finding my voice. I I imposter syndrome, self-doubt popped in, and I would be at the slams, wondering, will I ever be able to write like these people? Will I ever be able to perform my poetry? Um, and the thing that I finally got straight in my head is the fact that because they have an award-winning poem, they don't write those every day. Everybody has some blah poems, etc. What you're seeing in slam is a poem that someone has taken and they've polished it and worked with it and made it, a diamond out of a lump of coal. And that lightning in the bottle doesn't happen every time. So you have to find your voice, what fits you, what allows you to get out what you want, the stuff that's in your head, and find your own voice and then be authentic about it. So that was a thing I had to do early in the process and find my voice. And my sort of mentor, she doesn't know it, but my sort of mentor is Marilyn Nelson, because I had picked up her book, and it's actually a children's book. It's called How I Discovered Poetry. And she wrote in that one. Her dad was in the Air Force too, and then I felt such a kinship. And she wrote in nice plain English, like I tend to do, like a storyteller. And I'm like, that's a Newbery Award winner. But it's a whole collection of hers. It's a Newbery Award winning collection. Marilyn Nelson, How I Discovered Poetry. She can get an award writing that like I do. So I'm like, that was there's aspiration there. I had a mentor. So
Okay.
yeah. She's got a bunch of collections. She she's also one of the poets that a lot of the Poet Out Loud kids, they take some of her poems worth. I think I heard the one year that I went to Poetry Out Loud, the semifinals here, I heard Wealth by two different people, and then another poem of hers by two different people. So she's often selected for Poetry Out Loud presentations.
And for anyone who's newer to the poetry community or poetry in general, could you tell us what Poetry Out Loud is?
Okay. Poetry Out Loud is where high school students um, basically compete for at the local, regional, state, and national level, and they're not. It's not the same as slam because they're not doing their own original poetry. They're doing classics, Jabberwocky, and some of the others. Um, and it's all about their presentation. And we, Chiquita Mullins has been over it for a while. Um, and basically, we've seen some fabulous poets and poetry presenters come through the program. And the OPA has now done three showcases at the Ohio State Fair. And we always started out with the winners of Poetry Out Loud, the first, second, and third place winners travel and come to and do a mini feature of the poems that they did during the contest. And you can sometimes catch some of the regional, you can catch local ones and you can catch some of the regional ones. And Steve, Nancy Kangas, and Rose Smith have often been judges for it.
It's wonderful to know that there's that kind of an outlet. I had no idea that was even a thing.
Yep.
That is really amazing. We'll look into that.
And yeah, Karen, and that's kind of what this is that because we want to chronicle the history of the of poetry in Columbus, but also you poets who made this Columbus scene what it is, and so in your part, and so that's why you see our questions are geared to you telling us who you are. That's we want people to know who the people are here in Columbus. I mean, and so we have a long way to go because there's a whole bunch of you guys out here. There's names. We get names from some of you, because we don't even come close to knowing who all the people are. But and then it just goes down. So that's what we want to do. We want it to be there's something that keeps this history, and it's like in the oral tradition because we're doing it with storytelling. But we want people to know who the poets are as people. So we just want to say again how much we appreciate you being here and sharing, Karen, with us. And so I think that's a good segue into like, what is your creative process? What does that look like for you? You have rituals or?
No, I have been asked that question before, and I am what I term a percolator poet. Those old-fashioned coffee pots where they percolated and things spun around until it was ready. Basically, an idea gets in my head and it swirls around in there until it's mostly ready, and when it's ready, it pours out on paper. It tells me when it's ready. I don't really have any rituals. I plan to write the poem about my muse because my muse is mischievous, irrational. She talks to me when I'm in places where I can't sit down and write a poem, like in the car and stuff like that. And then when I sit down in front of the computer or with pen and paper, it's nothing. Yeah, she's not talking. So I don't really have any rituals. I'm not one of those people who's regimented and sits down and writes, gets up an hour early and writes, in the morning. And even though I'm a night owl and I stay up half the night, I don't necessarily do writing. I'm not a daily writing kind of person. The only sort of ritual thing I have is that I do when I hear lines, when I hear ideas. I've always got my paper and pencil, and I write down a little blurb just to stir the memory later. And literally right here on my desk, I have a small box full of little scraps of paper and envelopes, and so if I needed to become that regimented writer, I could just sit down and like each day take a piece of scrap of paper and try and work on it. But I have found for myself over the years, if I try to force a poem, it generally is never to my liking.
Shop talk. Because as I'm learning more about people's styles and whatnot, for me as a poet, it's like you, it's the percolator thing. And this is a weird, unofficial research I'd like to ask people. How often do you have words going through your head? Like, are the poems always there?
um, Sometimes it's kind of like a flash across the screen, and if you don't make that little note on that paper, it may not come back to you for a long time. That train may not come back into the station. Um, but yeah, so many things trigger thoughts. And that's why my muse talks to me a lot when I'm driving, because my mind is open free. It's almost like a meditation. And and basically, um most of the time poems, they've percolated up there. There are some that are on the back burner. I know I've got at least one poem that's probably almost 10 years old stirring around in there, and it's like, when are you going to be ready to be on the paper? Okay. And it'll pop up and it'll go, hey, remember me? And then it'll go, oh, I'm not ready yet. So
Sorry, I'm having a weird emotional response because
it's
you're speaking to
validation.
me. You're speaking to me, and it's really heavy. I apologize. So, driving, like you said, when your mind is clear, and I'm sure shower thoughts too. That wonderful thing when no. Ooh.
I am not a shower person. I call myself like a landlocked mermaid. I prefer I prefer long soaks in the tub. And so I read in the tub. I Yeah, I'm not so much a shower person. I'm a landlocked mermaid.
I get that. I can see that too. Yeah. Um, besides those two things, what else sparks your inspiration? Like, do you ever do anything on a thematic level?
Once in a blue moon. I mean, just almost anything can spark it. I listen to country music, and I I do it partly because the lyrics are great. The poetry and the music is great, and I can hear it, I can understand it. And a lot of times turn of phrases will pop up and you go, hey, okay. And then that. And I'm also an addicted reader. And so I will find phrases in books that spark a poem. Um, I sometimes, I sometimes like Lady Gaga, I wake up like this. Um, the poem "The Garden," the quirky one that I have about a serial killer and girls with botanical names. That one, probably because I watch a lot of true crime, and I also fall asleep with the TV on and wake up with the TV still going. I I probably had some subliminal influence on that one, but I woke up and went to the computer and pulled that poem out. And it also had some of the internet searching, because I was searching for botanical names that could also be girls' names. So I sometimes do internet searches and build a poem off of those. Um, Sometimes meeting people in conversations, and those will come up. And poets also are often great eavesdroppers. We're observers of people. So the best thing that people have said, you go to the coffee shop and just sit there and hear other people's conversations, or in the grocery store, or waiting on the bus, or riding on the bus. You hear other people's conversations and turn them into poems. So inspiration is all around. So
I like that, Karen. That inspiration is just like it's just there. Because, like you say, when people, if you're a poet or even if you're just a writer, you are an eavesdropper, and not in a malicious type of sense, but you're very aware of what's going on around you, and you watch people, you listen. Yeah. So
I
thank
mean,
you.
for an example, I might have been at like a book fair or something, and this little boy about 7 ran over to the table, and he turned back to his mom, and he goes, "This is just shrieking your name." And I looked at him and I go, he's going to be a poet.
Yeah, because right, where did he get that from?
It's not an average 7-year-old conversation.
Right, this is
And she
your
said that.
name.
She said, yeah, he's big on words. I go, poet.
So now that you said that, this isn't in there, but we can kind of freestyle too. Um, the mom making that comment that he's big on words.
Mm-hmm.
How are you, Karen? Are you big on words?
I love words, and I even put that in a poem once. In my poem, "Different," that basically I'm someone who just gets kind of geeked out about words and word origins, and I love words, and I love the sound of words. I love the root words. I took Latin in high school and a little bit in college. And Latin, since there are no native speakers
Mhm.
of Latin, you don't have to worry about pronunciation, but it becomes almost like crossword puzzles, because you can see where words in English and French and Spanish and the Romance based languages, you can see where they came from. And I have found the same thing while I'm learning Scottish Gaelic, where we can see where root words and where phrases came from. And one of my most joyous finds, probably in the last 5 years, was there are a couple of websites with obsolete and little used words, and it is fantastic. And I got led to that by, I think it was an old episode of Columbo or something, and one of the actors, a character who was an actor, he said something about this is a flambiguous claim, and I was like, okay, first I got to look that word up, and then two, then I found out, it's an obsolete word, and there are a couple of websites that just have lists of them, of words that I think should be brought back, but but yeah, I love words.
Off the top of your head, do you know any of those websites that you could recommend for anyone who would like to find that?
I can send them to you later. One of them I got from Zach Hanna. I posted about it, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, try this website." So I'll try and find them later, and I can send them to you, Ryan.
That would be great.
But yeah, those words are great. And then yeah, every now and then some of those clickbait things, they'll pop up with 10 words that are not in use, but we think should come back or whatever. But I also, because I read so much, I I will, even when I can interact with authors, I tell them, oh, I'm really glad you taught me a new word today. And poets also, it's like if I have to look it up to see what it means, and it's not part of my stored vocabulary versus your working vocabulary. If it's not in my vocabulary at all, I'm really happy when I'm taught a new word.
I'm trying to think of how to say this question, so bear with me. I'm also okay. So in college, I had written a poem, and it started with drug names, like specific, like Coumadin. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
I was a medical technologist for about 35 years. Yeah.
Okay, you got it. You got it. So it was basically a lamentation of having to go on blood thinners, that kind of thing. And it was crucial for the rhyme structure, so it had to be Coumadin. And my professor at the time criticized me a little bit. She's like, you're expecting the reader to do a little too much work here. So I guess the question I want to ask, do you think it's okay for the poet to expect their reader to do a little bit of work?
Okay. I remember, like, with English composition, etc., a lot of times people tell you to know your audience, and but I hate dumbing things down. I think too much of our lives today are dumbed down, and to the point where people are now dumb. But um, I I like being asked by the author to embrace new words, new ways of putting things. Um, some of, like, Rachel McKibbin's has done workshops where basically you write the poem and then now you go back through and you find new words for all the nouns or all the verbs, and just to exercise that. And it also, the question that you ask also underscores why it's really important to find a group of people to write with, and people have different experiences, etc. And they can tell you. I mean, I know that sometimes Steve doesn't really want you to make the reader work. And then you've got me. I'd like for the reader to work. I depend on, I just assume that the reader is better maybe than they actually are, that they want to be pushed in, and that, but yet I still present them with plain English and then guide them along. But no, I'm not adverse to making a reader. I'm not going to write down to the dumb element.
Thank you very much. And thank you for being with us today, dear listener. Please join us next time for part 2 of our interview with Karen Scott. Until then, bye-bye. Poems and Potions is produced by Mandar Kath, Marquita Byers, and R. Taryn Lear. Music provided by Charity Dietrich. Sound support provided by A.D. Dietrich.